Good morning. This is Laura reading a very thin county press for Friday the 27th of December. As this news will be attached to next week's county press, there is no society news for this week. The headline in the county press for Friday, December the 27th, Home for Christmas. 1 year after horror attack, Cam is home for the holiday. A year after he was given 48 hours to live, after he was punched with such force that he suffered brain damage, Cameron Shirley has come home for Christmas. On December the 13th last year, Cameron, then 17, was assaulted in the Fishbourne Inn car park as he waited to meet a friend from the ferry. An argument with another teenage boy escalated into a fight, and Cameron sustained several blows to the head. He was hit with such force that his brain moved 14 millimetres to the right. Any movement of more than 10 millimetres carries a 93% mortality rate. An 18-year-old Cowsman was arrested, but no charges were brought. Cameron was airlifted to Southampton General Hospital, where he was placed in a medically induced coma and underwent emergency surgery to cut away a section of his skull, relieving the pressure on his bleeding, oxygen-starved brain. 6 weeks later, he remained in intensive care at the Queen Alexandra Hospital in Portsmouth, fed through a tube and unable to move or communicate with his family. After spending a year fighting for his life, he has made remarkable progress. His mum, Elisa Shirley, 41, who runs the Victoria Lodge Hotel in Shanklin, said, "He still struggles with his right arm, but his left arm is fully functional. We're now able to get speech out of him, and we're pushing every day with his rehab. He's going to be in hospital until at least the summer. We were very excited to have our Cam home for Christmas Day." Cameron's siblings, Callista, 17, Lucy, 12, and Thomas, 9, found it particularly difficult to cope after Cameron was attacked and were thrilled to have their brother home for Christmas. They helped prepare the family home to make it accessible for Cameron's wheelchair. Elisa says, "As a family, we're much closer than ever before, so some good has come from it. Everyone pitches in, and you don't realise what you have until something like this happens. We're coping as a family and living each day as it comes." Elisa continues to spearhead the Cam's Army campaign to raise awareness about the devastating impact fighting can have. 3 schools have already used Cam's story as an example, and there are plans to release an information video produced by the Islands Glasshouse Productions next year. "It's been a roller coaster of emotions with manic highs and so many lows," Elisa posted on Facebook just before Christmas. "But I will spend Christmas with him on my sofa, not in a coma." Festive tales put down in words. Enchanting Tales were celebrated at Sight for White's 4th Short Story Writing Competition award ceremony. Approximately 150 people attended the ceremony at the Riverside Centre in Newport to find out who the 25 winners were and enjoy entertainment from the Medina Community Choir and Huxley the Magician. Miriam Tong, Chief Executive, opened the event, and Chris Kane, the Marketing, Communications and Fundraising Manager, was Master of Ceremonies. The Under-12s category winner was Ben Fry, with his story Christmas Joy, recorded by actor Melvin Hayes. A prize was given to the youngest entrant, Adam Kirby, 6, who also had his story, Christmas Present, recorded by the actor. The 12 to 17 years category winner was Ella Breer with her story The Sound of Christmas, recorded by Wave 105 presenter Kate Weston. The highly commended category winner was Dr. Marguerite Howick with her story In the Blink of an Eye, recorded by Adana Minghella. The 18-plus winner was Roy Perry with his story Silent Nights, recorded by actor Michael Maloney. Chris, who organised the competition, thanked the entrants, entertainers, sponsors and voice artists. Sight for White raised £657. Special Christmas gift for horror crash teen. A teenage girl who was rushed to hospital following a horror crash in Freshwater paid a visit to the firefighters who saved her and received a very special Christmas gift. Bryony and her mum, Joanna, were among those who attended Freshwater Fire Station's Community Christmas Hug event held at the station last Tuesday. Bryony was thrilled to receive an early Christmas present from the crew, a pink fluffy coat, to replace the one that firefighters cut off when she was extricated from the crashed car. Driver Joe's 3 weeks off his 18th birthday at the time of the crash, and Bryony, 17, were both hospitalised following the Afton Road crash in October. Joe's was airlifted to Southampton with 2 broken legs. Following the community Christmas hug, firefighters posted on the Friends of Freshwater Fire Station Facebook page, "One of the most rewarding things about working in the emergency services is when we get to see people we have dealt with at terrible incidents weeks later, well on the way to recovery and looking healthy and happy. The last time we all saw Bryony, she was laying on the road on a cold, dark October night after self-extricating from the crashed car. She was in terrible pain, unable to move, and very distressed. Bryony's mum, Joanna, attended the scene while we were working on Bryony and initially thought Bryony had passed away and was understandably distraught beyond words. During the process of assessing and treating Bryony's injuries, we had to cut her coat off using scissors, which caused Bryony even more distress. After all, we all remember how precious our clothes were to us when we were teenagers." On Tuesday night at our community Christmas hug, Bryony and Joanna were among other people who attended the station to meet the emergency services personnel who had been at incidents in which they were involved. It was incredibly emotional for Bryony and Joanna and for the firefighters who were at the incident in October to meet each other in much happier circumstances. Also joining us was local resident Glenn Hepburn from Afton Road. The RTC happened almost directly outside Glenn's house, and Glenn was on the road comforting Bryony when we arrived. Glenn remained with us while we worked on Bryony, and on Tuesday night, he and Bryony and Joanna got to meet each other for the first time since the incident happened. There were, of course, tears of joy and hugs between them all. To ease Bryony's distress when we were working on her, we promised her we would find her a new coat exactly the same as the one we had to cut off. With a little bit of conspiring with Bryony's mum, we managed to find almost exactly the same coat, and the fire crew made an early Christmas gift of this to Bryony on Tuesday night. Bryony did what we all would have done at her age, threw off the coat she arrived in and happily wrapped up in the new pink fluffy coat. We wish the greatest luck to Bryony and her mum Joanna as they continue with the recovery process. Pair jailed for armed robbery. 2 men have been jailed for 6 years for a knife-point robbery that saw a teenager stabbed in the eye. Dylan Doughty, 22, of no fixed address, and Ashley Jones, 21, of High Street Ryde, both pleaded guilty to 5 counts of robbery when they appeared at the Isle of Wight Crown Court. The court heard the pair attacked a group of 5 friends as they headed home after a night out in Ryde. The duo ran up to the group in Swanmore Road at around 12:30 a.m. on October the 13th, threatening them with a knife and demanding they hand over whatever they had on them. One member of the group, an 18-year-old man from Ventnor, was stabbed with the knife under his eyelid. Doctors later said he was lucky not to have lost his sight. He is still receiving treatment for damage to his eye. The pair were identified through a photograph posted on social media. They were quickly arrested and were found to be in possession of some of the items stolen from the group. Both were sentenced to 6 years in prison, followed by an additional 3 years on licence. Detective Constable Lee Parker said, "This was a terrifying attack on a group of friends who were simply walking home after a night out together. This could have easily ended with a teenager losing his eyesight. It is sheer luck that didn't happen. This was a totally random attack, and I'm pleased that these 2 dangerous men are safely behind bars. I would like to thank the victims for their bravery throughout this investigation and all the witnesses who spoke to us and shared what they knew to ensure that these 2 no longer pose a risk to those living and working on the island." Drink and drug driving arrests. A police clampdown targeted untaxed, uninsured and unlicensed vehicles and has resulted in several arrests. Last Thursday, police carried out a partnership operation to target untaxed and undocumented vehicles and drivers, involving police officers from the Isle of Wight's Joint Armed Response and Roads Policing Team, Mainland Roads Policing Officers and Isle of Wight Neighbourhood Officers in partnership with the DVLA. Throughout the operation, police also carried out routine breath tests and drug wipe tests as part of the ongoing Operation Holly Christmas Drink and Drug Drive campaign. Following the day of action, 13 vehicles were seized at the roadside by the DVLA, all of which had to be taxed immediately before the drivers were allowed to leave. 6 penalty notices were issued for offences. 1 driver was detained for drink driving and was charged and bailed to the Isle of Wight Magistrates Court. 4 drivers were arrested on suspicion of being over a specified drug limit and have been released under investigation pending blood analysis. A number of vehicles were also seized for uninsured or unlicensed use, and penalty notices were issued for road traffic offences. Sergeant Simon Morgan of the Isle of Wight's Road Policing Team and Acting Sergeant Jason Taylor of Ryde Neighbourhoods Policing Team said, "There is a clear link between unlicensed, untaxed and uninsured vehicles and other forms of criminal activity or road safety. It's clear the number of vehicles we identified which do not have the correct credentials or paperwork is decreasing each time we do this. That shows the positive outcome of operations like this. We will continue to work with the DVLA and other partner agencies in the next year to continue to improve road safety and to target vehicles and people that should not be on the island roads." The vast majority of drivers provided negative tests. Operation Holly will continue throughout the festive period. CCTV released after bus assault. Police have released CCTV image taken on board a Southern Vectis bus after a man was repeatedly punched in the head by a fellow passenger. Officers have issued an appeal for information following the assault, which happened on a bus travelling from Newport to Ryde. The victim was sitting at the rear of the top deck on October the 7th, between 6:10 p.m. and 6:20 p.m, talking to another man and a woman. He did not know either the man or the woman. After around 10 minutes, the man punched the victim in the head multiple times before alighting the bus with the woman. After carrying out inquiries, police have now released this CCTV image of the man that they would like to speak to in connection with the incident. They have asked the public to help locate him. He is described as being between 20 and 30 years old, with a slim build and brown hair. Officers are also keen to speak to the woman who was involved in the conversation. She is described as being between 20 and 30 years old, with blonde hair. She was wearing a white top and carrying a number of shopping bags, including a blue Next bag. Do you recognise the description of the man or the woman? Anyone with information can call police on 101, quoting the reference number 441903589773. Alternatively, information can be given to Crime Stoppers anonymously on 0800 555 111. Mother of 2 killed herself at Culver Cliff. A Ryde mother killed herself at Culver Cliff, an inquest has heard. A huge search was launched in February last year for 42-year-old Joanna Orpin when she went missing, and the police asked the public to help trace her. Her partner was arrested on suspicion of murder but was later released, something he received a public apology for at the inquest. It was made clear he had been completely exonerated of any involvement. The inquest heard Miss Orpin was suffering a severe depressive episode similar to one she had suffered 18 years previously. Her family felt she should have been treated with electroconvulsive therapy, which had made a radical improvement to her condition before. Isle of Wight coroner Caroline Summeray said Miss Orpin had been a capable senior recruitment consultant with a loving family, but a series of events precipitated a decline in her mental health. She said this was recognised by her GP, who grasped the severity at an early stage and escalated her treatment appropriately and quickly. She was treated by several mental health workers and for a period of time was visited daily at home. Ms. Orpin left her home on the morning of February the 13th and drove to Culver. Her car was discovered parked at the cliff, but her body wasn't found until February the 17th, when a sea kayaker came across it in the water near Chichester Harbour. Mrs. Summeray said Miss Orpen's actions were a deliberate, tragic act, and with deep regret she would record a conclusion that she took her own life. The cause of death was multiple traumatic injuries. Nursery shuts due to insolvency. Staff at a children's nursery were made redundant just days before Christmas, after the owner announced it would close due to insolvency. In a letter to parents, the owner of Bembridge Montessori, Jackie Seymour, said the nursery would close last Friday, following financial difficulties over the past year. She said she was working with a business debt charity and hoped to raise funds by selling the nursery equipment to another provider. She said in the letter, "Once I receive funds, my priority must be to ensure staff receive their pay and redundancy settlements, then return registration deposits to parents, and after that repay my creditors. I would ask that you are patient and accept my commitment to return deposits as soon as possible." Parent Lisa Marie Sadanea has launched a £1,757 fundraising appeal to pay staff their December wages. She said, "The staff that loyally remained with the school have found out 6 days before Christmas that the nursery is going into insolvency and their December wages will not be paid. Let's put some Christmas cheer into our local community and help to pay towards the money they've lost." Despite efforts to cut costs by making redundancies and reducing staffing hours, Ms. Seymour said the final blow was a reduction in local authority-funded payments from January. She said, "We simply cannot continue to offer the service we have been so proud of for our children." Earlier this year, the nursery's Ofsted rating was downgraded from good to requires improvements. Isle of Wight areas underwater by 2050. Several areas of the island have been projected to be below the flood level in 2050. Climate Central has released improved elevation data and updated maps, which indicate far greater global threats from sea level rise and coastal flooding than previously thought, and greater benefits from reducing their causes. The island is shown as having areas at risk, including much of the Eastern Yare area, Hampstead and Yarmouth. An Isle of Wight Council spokesperson said, "Predicting and mitigating the risks of flooding of land from the sea is a national issue which is the responsibility of the Environment Agency. The Council works closely with the Environment Agency to help with its work, for example recently at Simeon Street Recreation Ground in Ryde." A spokesperson for the Environment Agency said it was already investing £2.6 billion of government funding up to 2021 to better protect 300,000 homes from flooding, coastal erosion and sea level rise. They said, "We build climate change predictions into the design of our flood and coastal defence projects to make sure they are fit for the future. Some of these projects have a lifespan of up to 100 years or more, so it is vitally important they are resilient in tomorrow's climate." In May this year, Environment Agency Chair Emma Howard-Boyd launched a draft long-term flood and coastal risk management strategy for England. The draft strategy, which has recently been out for public consultation, sets out a plan for tackling, preparing for and adapting to the additional risks climate change will bring. The recommendations include ensuring all infrastructure is resilient to flooding and coastal change by 2050, committing an average £1 billion per year to flood and coastal defences and natural flood management over the next 50 years, and building climate resilience into every new home and property development. The Environment Agency manages and maintains around 1,000 kilometres of coastal defences, 7,000 kilometres of flood defences on main rivers, and approximately 17,000 structures, helping to keep homes and businesses across the country safe from flooding. Lifelong leases offered to St Vincent's veterans. Lifelong leases have been offered to all veterans and spouses living in accommodation in the grounds of St Vincent's Retirement Home in Ryde, as part of the sale of the properties. The 19 bungalows and apartments were previously owned by SSAFA, the Armed Forces charity, but have recently changed hands. It follows the sale of St Vincent's itself, which is now owned by White Home Care. As reported, it was feared the home would close before the sale was agreed. A spokesperson for SSAFA said, "The 19 bungalows and apartments in the grounds of St Vincent's retirement home, which is currently under the ownership of White Home Care, have been sold. There are currently 27 beneficiaries in these properties. To ensure commitments to the current residents of these properties are upheld as part of the sales process, SSAFA has included an option for all residents to sign a lifelong lease. This has been offered in person to every resident." One resident told the county press there was some comfort in the new year lease, as previously veterans' widows would have had 6 months to find somewhere else to live when their spouses died. Now they can stay in their home for the rest of their lives. When the sale was agreed last year, White Home Care Managing Director Diane Radcliffe said, "I am proud and delighted to be taking over St Vincent's and to carry on the legacy of care started by SSAFA, the Armed Forces charity." Piggyback at high tide. A woman in her 60s had to be given a piggyback so she could board the floating bridge during high tide. Jane Porter, 63, said passengers were told they had to walk through deep water up to their mid-shins to board the bridge. Unwilling to get her trainers drenched, she was unsure what to do, and said a member of staff said, "Do you want to get on or not?" A younger woman, who said she was strong enough to carry Mrs. Porter, as she was a regular gym user, offered her a piggyback. Mrs. Porter said, "I was wearing trainers as I have a bad ankle, and they would have been wet all day. Surely they could have a gangplank or some way for people to board sensibly during high tide, without having to wade through so much water. I was so mad I phoned the council. They told me it didn't happen very often, but I don't find that acceptable." A spokesperson for the Isle of Wight Council said, "The supervisor spoke to a member of the public who was concerned about the tide. As a result of her suggestion, we are looking into whether any kind of aid or structure could help on the rare occasions when the high tide affects access." Man claimed he had a gun. A man claimed to have a gun and kicked a police officer in the testicles before he was wrestled to the ground and arrested. Alan Witherington, 41, appeared at the Isle of Wight Magistrates Court on December the 12th, where he admitted assaulting an emergency worker. The court heard police were called to his ex-wife's Bembridge home on December the 10th after he threatened to harm himself. Prosecutor Anne Smout said, "When police arrived, they found him in the garden crouched on the ground. He told them he had a gun and made a gun shape with his fingers, then pointed them at the officer. Mr. Witherington resisted arrest and kneed the officer in the testicles before being wrestled to the ground. He later told police his comment about the gun was intended to be sarcastic." The court heard Witherington had been living with his partner in Sussex in recent weeks, but had returned to the island to see his daughter and attend a detox programme. However, his partner had left him and he had been drinking on the day of the incident. Oscar Vincent, defending, said his client was vulnerable and suffered with anxiety and post-traumatic stress disorder. He had argued with his ex-wife after she refused to give him the keys to his motorbike. She called the police, unbeknown to Mr. Witherington, so he had no idea why they suddenly turned up and were restraining him. He was confused. He does admit he struck the officer in the testicles, although accidentally. Witherington was released on bail ahead of his sentencing on December the 30th. Tributes to White Fibre boss killed in car crash. Tributes have been paid to the Chief Operating Officer of White Fibre, who has been killed in a car crash. Simon Poole, 47, was hit by a car in Southampton last Monday. White Fibre Chief Executive John Irvine said, "It is with much sadness we report Simon Poole, our popular and much-loved Chief Operating Officer, was killed in a road traffic accident. This truly tragic event has shocked us all. Simon was a truly devoted family man. Our thoughts are first and foremost with Simon's wife and young family at this very difficult time. Simon will be sorely missed by his family, his colleagues here at White Fibre, our customers, suppliers and business partners across the island." Simon joined White Fibre in January 2017 and was a key member of White Fibre's management team, leading our award-winning sales, service and field engineering teams. Among Simon's many achievements at White Fibre was the recruitment of more than 30 new employees, many of whom he personally coached and mentored. It is for this personal and caring touch that Simon will be remembered most and why he will be so sadly missed by so many. Simon joined the Royal Navy straight from school and served in the Falkland Islands and the Middle East. He celebrated his 21st wedding anniversary this year with his wife Louise. He lived with Louise and their 3 children aged 6, 15 and 18 in the New Forest. Stowaway cat Lucy home for Christmas. A cat has arrived home on the island in time for Christmas, after stowing away in a horse box and travelling all the way to Scotland. Following her Scottish adventure, Lucy the cat has returned home to grateful owner Zara Ellis, thanks to complimentary travel provided by Whitelink, Flybe and generous cat lovers. Black cat Lucy hid in a neighbour's horse box just before they moved house from Ryde and promptly found herself 520 miles away on the island of Lismore in the Inner Hebrides. Zara said, "We put up posters and spread the word when she went missing, but no one knew anything. To be honest, we'd almost given up hope." Meanwhile, my former neighbours had put the horse box in a barn at their new home in Scotland. We think Lucy survived by eating mice until they spotted her 3 weeks later and got in touch with me. Whitelink said it was happy to help bring Lucy home to the island for Christmas. 20 jobs lost as hotel closes. A Shanklin hotel has closed following the collapse of Carloran Group, with the loss of 20 jobs. Carloran Group administrators have announced the closure of 3 hotels within its Heritage Hotel Group, including Auckland House Hotel. Headway Hotel in Morecambe will also close, and Cumbria's Lambert Manor is closing the main hotel, although the lodges and pool facilities will remain open. In total, 64 staff have been made redundant. The news follows the appointment of Quantama and Duff and Phelps as joint administrators of the Carloran Group, with a remit to investigate the disappearance of more than £50 million of investors' money. Carl Jackson, managing partner at Quantama, said, We were appointed joint administrators on November the 28th and have been working tirelessly to stabilise the position of the group. With regret, it has been necessary to make the difficult decision to close 3 of the Heritage Hotel properties. The seasonal nature of these properties means heavy trading losses are forecast for the first quarter of the year, meaning any profits made elsewhere in the group would be negated. Our immediate priority is to ensure those affected receive the appropriate support required to make the necessary claims from the Redundancy Payment Service. We will be closely managing the group's trading position and will possibly seek to take steps to reopen some or all of these properties as appropriate in due course. In the meantime, the remaining properties in the group will continue to trade. Christmas appeal to adopt a child. At Christmas time, Adopt South has called out across the Isle of Wight for more people to consider adopting and give children in care the lifelong and precious gift of a loving family and stable home life. It would be amazing if, over the next year, we could find adopters for our children who, for a variety of reasons, cannot live with their birth parents, so they can enjoy their next Christmas with their forever family, said Rachel Reynolds, head of Adopt South. 6 years ago, one island couple decided to adopt so they could have a bigger family. Kat and Rob, who have a 2-year-old son of their own, were unable to have more children. Rob said, "We always wanted a bigger family, and at first we had our hearts set on adopting a baby girl. However, as luck would have it, we found ourselves caring not only for a 3-week-old baby girl, but also her twin brother. It didn't take us long to agree to adopt, and we made sure we explained to our son what was going on throughout the process. The twins were a year old before they formally became our son and daughter and our special gift that Christmas. Our older son was bowled over with excitement, and he has never been jealous. In fact, he is quite protective and will get upset if one of them hurts themselves. Christmas as a family of 3 used to be quiet and calm, but now, especially as we usually get together with my sister and her children, they are noisy, crazy and chaotic, but we all absolutely love it and would not have it any other way. Rachel said, "We know it's not always an easy change from the start in every case, as it was for Kat and Rob. Some of our children will have had experiences that are hard to forget, and they have to learn to trust and feel secure, something they may not have had. With time, love, lots of hugs and a constant feeling you are there for them, they will have every chance to thrive and enjoy not only Christmas, but the rest of their lives." Waverley paddle steamer saved. A fundraising appeal to save the Waverley has reached its £2.3 million target in just 7 months. It was feared the popular paddle steamer may not sail again after it was withdrawn from service this year, for the first time in 45 years, when it became apparent work to repair the ship's boilers had not been successful and they would have to be replaced. The 73-year-old ship is the last sea-going passenger-carrying steamer in the world and regularly drops off and picks up visitors from the Isle of Wight. The boiler refit appeal attracted donations from more than 8,000 people and several trusts, with support from the Paddle Steamer Preservation Society and a £1 million contribution from the Scottish Government. The Waverley's new boilers are currently being built by Cochrane's in Annan, Scotland. The work required will involve the removal of the ship's iconic twin funnels to allow access to the boiler room. Waverley Excursions General Manager Paul Semple said, "Thanks to the fantastic generosity of so many people and organisations, we are now able to push ahead with the boiler refit, which will be the most substantial refit since her rebuild was completed back in 2003. I would like to thank everyone who has donated to the appeal and supported our efforts to save the last sea-going paddle steamer in the world." The Waverley will be towed to Glasgow in January, where the bulk of the 4-month refit will take place, before the steamer sails again next year. Seasonal fun. Christmas spirit was abundant in West Wight over recent days. Emergency services from across the island joined forces with Freshwater Fire Station as part of a Christmas community hug. Firefighters, past and present, were joined by colleagues from the Isle of Wight Ambulance Service, HM Coast Guard, NCI and Freshwater Independent Lifeboat. Local children decorated the station's trees and were entertained by Huxley Magician. Nearly £250 was raised from the Freshwater Bay Residents Association Carol concert at St Agnes Church on Saturday. Around 100 people packed into church, with Barney Barnes and the Bay Wailers heading the evening, accompanied by Pam Wedgwood on the organ. Afterwards, the congregation was treated to mulled wine made by Becca Cameron and mince pies. The money will go towards the church floor fund. A huge crowd turned up outside Freshwater Library for a carol concert organised by the Freshwater Coffee House Christmas Carols and the Parish Council on Friday. The Bay Wailers and West Wind supported the singers and other businesses stayed open late. The recently formed West Wight Dementia Choir earned a huge ovation after its first carol service. The choir was set up in September by musician and composer Pam Wedgwood of Freshwater Bay. They sang The Virgin Mary Had a Baby Boy and Ding Dong Merrily on High at a Churches Together dementia service at Freshwater Methodist Church. Pam directed, accompanied by Richard Britton and Sam Wedgwood on trumpet, with the congregation joining in the rest of the programme. If anyone living with dementia is interested in joining the choir, contact West Wight Dementia Choir at gmail.com. The next choir morning is on Wednesday, January the 8th in Freshwater Methodist Church between 10:30 a.m. and noon. 2 new sites for Wildlife Trust. The Hampshire and Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust has bought 2 new island sites, creating its largest nature reserve and paving the way for the introduction of beavers. Following a successful £245,000 fundraising appeal, the Trust has purchased both Parsonage Farm and Hill Heath along the Eastern Yar. The sites are adjacent to Martins Wood, Newchurch, an existing Trust nature reserve, and together will total 124 acres, the charity's largest reserve, and home to nationally important wildlife. Parsonage Farm and Hill Heath feature a rich tapestry of habitats, from ancient woodland and river to graze pasture and marshland. They boast floodplain meadow, acid grassland, fen, river, a lake and wood pasture. The habitats support a wide range of wetland species such as water voles, kingfishers, barn owls, snipe, woodcock, red squirrels, dormice, bats, many woodland birds and plants like wood anemones and bluebells. Trust Chief Executive Debbie Tan said, "What a way to end the year, and what fabulous news for wildlife on the island. We have such incredible plans for wildlife here, and will be undertaking a feasibility study for the introduction of beavers next year." The fundraising appeal was supported by the island community and businesses. Gemma Lacey, Director of Sustainability and Communications at the Southern Co-op, a long-term trust supporter, said, "This land will now become an integral part of a much larger network of sites on the Isle of Wight, enabling our native wildlife to thrive. Work like this is vital in helping to protect our precious green spaces for our communities and generations to come. We all need to play our part, which is why this campaign has been incredibly special, as every donation has made a difference. A special thanks to everyone who contributed and the Wildlife Trust for making it happen." Seasonal good cheer. Donkeys, carols and an appearance from Father Christmas brought festive cheer to East Cowes. 40 guests enjoyed a delicious lunch at Barton Manor, organised by Rouse Limited and Age UK Isle of Wight. Maria Bunce of Age UK Isle of Wight said, "Loneliness is high-profile news at the moment. I hope it will raise awareness here on the island." The Age UK Isle of Wight volunteering project is currently funded by the National Lottery, with more funding being sought. The White Brainy Bunch held their third annual Christmas market when Ryde Fire Station was transformed into a winter wonderland. Visitors browsed 30 stalls and heard from the Melodic Choir, Vectis Call of Drums, White Euchres, Arreton Primary School Handbell Ringers, Cinnamon and Canterbell. There was lots to do for children, and the Christmas card competition winner was Rosie, 10, from St Helens. The Isle of Wight Donkey Sanctuary held its annual carol service, complete with music from the White Accordion Group. A light-hearted reenactment of the Christmas story was led by the Rev Keith Adlam and lay reader Rita Goddard. That's all we've got time for, so that's the end of this part of the news. Goodbye. This is the second part of the County Press for Friday the 27th of December, read by Laura
and Megan. Right, we'll start with the letters. And here's one headed "Anti-Link Group Declares Victory." And it's written by Stuart Brown of the No Fix Link campaign, RIDE. I, alongside many like-minded individuals, began this campaign way back in 2014. The campaign was to oppose the ideas of Carl Feeney and his pro-link group in their campaign for a fixed link. It is fair to say that since 2014, ProLink and the company it created, Able Connections, have enjoyed limited success. They raised the issue of a fixed link, which had been no real proposition since 1998, and published the feasibility study undertaken from back then. They increased debate and the profile of the subject. They lobbied companies and interested parties and shared their ideas of the concept and its potential positives. I say positives as I have never excluded the idea that there aren't any. There are some obviously apparent advantages to a fixed connection to the mainland. And the argument, however, has always been that the potential to do harm outweighs the potential to do good. We campaigned against a fixed link on the basis it would potentially have an irreversible and detrimental effect on the island's environment, crime rate, hospital services, and increased road traffic and pollution. We were also concerned about the marine environment. Finally, there was never a guaranteed time frame. electric cars promised, or cost to the build or future toll. The toll was going to change based on who you were and when it was for. After 5 years of campaigning for and against monorails, bridges and tunnels, while dealing with a lot of bad blood and scaremongering from both sides at times, along with the failure of ProLink to raise funds for a viability study, those of us that were still members of the Solent Tunnel Group and not yet banned by Mr. Feeney discovered he intended to run for Island MP in December 2019. Following the election campaign and the convincing re-election of Bob Seeley with increased majority, it is clear there is no real mandate for a fixed link on the Isle of Wight. ProLink has over 6,000 members. Mr. Feeney, however, only managed 1,500 votes. Mr. Feeney himself has suggested he will quit his campaign, even indicating he may leave the island and watch the Isle of Wight slip into depravity. However, he has suggested quitting before, only to quickly change his mind. Therefore, the No Fix Link campaign declares victory against ProLink and the idea of a fixed link for good. As a result, the No Fix Link group will cease its campaign. The Facebook group will continue to operate for conversation. I will now step aside.
Tell governors what you think, from Steve Cowley in Wellow. It is good to see that in the latest primary school results, Yarmouth is continuing to improve and that this year's reception class was oversubscribed. West Wight parents still see Yarmouth as a school of choice. But the sorry saga of the West Wight school places rumbles on because the key aim of the Isle of Wight Council, Diocese and Governors is a shiny new school in Freshwater, regardless of any impact on the children's education if they move or damage to the community which supports it. The closure of All Saints was the Isle of Wight Council's first preferred option as it met the objectives of reducing surplus places. The Isle of Wight Council wanted to reduce the number of schools from 5 to 4 to save money. This is likely to go ahead now, and there will be no need to close Yarmouth. Although I respect the voluntary work of Yarmouth school governors in overseeing excellent educational outcomes for the pupils, they seem to have lost their way when proposing moving the school to Freshwater. They have not treated parents, carers and community with consideration. The legality of their decision-making process is now being questioned. Meanwhile, the latest Yarmouth parent-governor election has been aborted by the Isle of Wight Council because the election has not been carried out correctly. This was announced after the results were due out. Did they not like the result? In an earlier election, governors apparently lost one parent's name from the list of those applying. The governors have accused the community of not understanding why they want to close or move to Freshwater. Yet they have failed to attend, when invited, the public meeting to discuss the issue. The next public meeting of Yarmouth Town Council is Tuesday, January the 7th. I'm sure they would be welcome. Just at the end of their consultation period, they have extended it by nearly another month and seem to have extended it to the whole of the West Wight rather than Yarmouth school stakeholders. Again, did they not like the result? Is this because the parents and carers, stakeholders who previously said by 84% they wanted to keep the school in Yarmouth, still want that? To those who care about keeping the school in Yarmouth, please email the governors consultation@yarmouthceprimary.co.uk or write care of Yarmouth CE Primary School, Mill Road, Yarmouth, P0400RA.
And from Maria Vine from Newport, here to help despite loss. I would like to extend my thanks to all who braved the horrendous weather on December the 12th to exercise their right to vote in the Newport West Isle of Wight Council by-election. As a first-time candidate, I was humbled by the result, and as I watched the counting take place, I remembered fondly all those conversations I had. I listened to your concerns, which ranged from the local parking situation to the privatisation of the NHS. The conversations sit with me still. This wasn't lip service. I want to make a difference to you. I extend my congratulations to Richard Hollis, who won the by-election. There were many Labour Party members who gave up their free time to help, and I thank them wholeheartedly. To all of you who voted for me, or indeed any other party, I am still here, not elected, but always happy to take your concerns forward if you feel your voice is not heard.
Oil company prickly over our questions, from Sylvia May in Totland. It was encouraging to see a good number of islanders attending the UKOG Community Liaison meeting. Feedback from those attending has been varied, as reported on Drill or Drop. With regard to the slick factual handout created for the occasion and the panels within the room, it was disappointing to see that UKOG felt the need to make derogatory statements in the opening paragraph about their information being accurate, and to counter the fiction being circulated by well-known and ill-informed scaremongers. This seems more like a tactic to dismiss legitimate concerns on topics that deserve detailed scrutiny. Frack-Free IOW has previously provided detailed rebuttal of similar claims, including documented evidence from publicly available videos and written statements to investors made by Stephen Sanderson on behalf of UKOG, and would be happy to do so again. We witnessed some UKOG representatives were less than happy to answer questions about concerns or have them recorded. One of our subscribers stated, their language was not user-friendly, and they were quick to use terms and wording that would not be of common use to those outside of the organisation. Another said, I asked if they had been in contact with Hampshire and Isle of Wight Wildlife Trust and Gift to Nature to gain their views and expertise about the biodiversity of the island. They said they had not, but the trusts would have the opportunity to put their objections in after planning had gone in. One troubling statement, in response to my question regarding an environmental impact assessment, was their view it would not be required, but it would be up to the Isle of Wight Council Planning Department to insist one was undertaken. We hope to be able to influence this decision in the future. Another was the statement made by Stephen Sanderson that they would need to generate cash from their Horse Hill site to be able to fund their Isle of Wight projects. We will see whether a profit from that venture actually materialises.
Now, under White Memories, we have an article by Brian Greening, St Thomas's Church and Woodward's Omission. In October 1842, the Hampshire Advertiser carried a report that gave us an idea of the then state of Newport St Thomas's Church. The Victorian equivalent of the Health and Safety Brigade had decreed that the church was structurally unsafe. It began its report with the words, Newport Church has at last, after many years of neglect, been declared unsafe, and last Sunday the doors were shut to the public. Now ministers and members of the public have to seek sanctuary in a schoolroom. The article went on to state that for Newport to be in a worse state than it was at that time was hard to conceive. The church was like many other buildings within the town, having been left to itself over a course of years, not likely to tumble down, but hardly a place one would rush to visit. It was reported that the rain came through the roof, dropping into strategically placed buckets, or upon the heads of strangers who were ignorant of its shortcomings. It did not help that at Stapler's, St Paul's Church was being built, and in Node Hill stood St John's, built in 1837. Thus the poorer folk who lived on the outskirts of Newport would have new churches in which to worship, while Newport, the capital of the island, with all its prosperous tradesmen and rich residents, had to endure worshipping in a leaky, cold, run-down 700-year-old building. As we now know, our parish church was eventually restored, and therein lies another story. In August 1854, the foundation stone was laid by His Royal Highness Prince Albert. It would not be until December 1857 that the first service was held in the new church, with its consecration by the Bishop of Winchester following 1 month later. Today, 160 plus years later, the church has had a facelift, and we hope this will last another similar span of years. In the distant past, our local authorities were not slow to recognise the contribution wealthy inhabitants had made to the local economy. At East Cowes, the royal family had roads named after them, as did the Gort family. At Cowes, the Ward family and Mr. George Stevenson, the latter being the man that donated the green to the town, are recalled by roads bearing their name. In Newport, ex-Member of Parliament Mr. Cavendish Clifford too was acknowledged, and there are many other examples throughout the island. So why, I ask, was John Woodward omitted from the list? Who was John Woodward? I might hear you ask. Well, John left the island at the age of 10 in 1806, when he was taken to London by his father, who was a master bricklayer. There he was taught his trade, but sadly his father died when he was only 14 years old. However, the young boy knuckled down, worked hard, and became a master bricklayer himself. Lambeth was his field of labours, and he continued building year after year, and after building hundreds of houses and amassing a good fortune, he returned to the island in 1843, settling for an early rural retirement in the Rookley area. He built the school there at his own cost and handed it down with an endowment of £20 per annum. Later, he began building at Sandown, Knighton, and soon became a real local benefactor, especially to Newport's parish church. In 1857, he instructed Mr. Alfred Warne, a local clockmaker in Newport High Street, to erect the memorial clock that he had promised to provide for the tower of the newly rebuilt St. Thomas's Church. It was said at that time to be a very superior and costly clock, with 2 dials that would face south and west, with each dial being 7 feet in diameter. It was intended not only to be an ornament of the church, but a great advantage to the town's inhabitants, whose only town clock at the time was a bracket one on the side of Guildhall. The chiming of the quarters, it was said, would sound a pretty peal of bells when striking the hour on a bell weighing 18 hundredweight. A year later, the Hampshire Advertiser reported that 2 statues, said to be called Faith and Hope, that were portrait statues of Queen Victoria and her daughter, were also donated by John Woodward to St. Thomas's Church, that it was said would make the west front of the church complete. Today there appears to be no sign of these statues. In November 1859 there was a report of a tremendous storm that reportedly disfigured the outside of the restored church. Nearly every carved finial was blown off in the morning, together with some of the highly ornamented pinnacles on the tower that greatly damaged the roofing and windows in their fall. The old weathercock, too, it was said, had very great difficulty in maintaining its elevated position. Where were John Woodward's statues victim of this storm? Probably unlikely, but then we must ask, did they disappear? In politics, John was a staunch Conservative, and upon his death in 1872, at the age of just 66, he was buried in the churchyard at Godshill. Following his death, it took 3 separate auctions by Messrs. Francis Pittis to dispose of his portfolio of properties that was spread across the island. He had, though, in life, seen that his wealth had benefited the local community, even at one time coming to the aid of the Ventnor boys' cricket 11. It is therefore surprising that no street or building carries his name. With so much development presently underway, perhaps this could be rectified. Now we go on to My View, a column this time written by Malcolm Mime. And the title is All I Am Saying is Give Bob a Chance. In my previous column at the beginning of November, I asked the following question. Will Boris Johnson convince voters he is now a true Brexiteer? It turns out the answer was an emphatic yes. There is no denying Brexit has caused a lot of ill feeling in Britain over the past few years, but the election result means we can now move on, and perhaps all those who have continuously tried to overturn the result of the EU referendum will finally accept Brexit is happening. The Isle of Wight electorate showed at the 2016 referendum it was in favour of Brexit and backed that up by electing Brexiteer Bob Seely in 2017 and by giving a majority vote to the Brexit Party in May's EU elections. With Nigel Farage pulling his Brexit Party candidate out of last week's election, it pretty much left Brexiteer Bob with a clear path to victory. For some bizarre reason, former UKIP candidate Daryl Pitcher threw his hat into the election ring as an independent Brexit candidate, but he only attracted 795 voters and lost his deposit. As it was always going to be all about Brexit, the other candidates were also on a hiding to nothing. I can't understand why Carl Love, 874 votes, or Carl Feeney, 1,542 votes, entered the race. In the case of Mr. Feeney, who was running on a fixed-link ticket, all he managed to prove is that there is no appetite whatsoever for a fixed link. It is a subject I have never once mentioned in this column of mine, and there is no good reason. It just ain't happening. It's a non-event. I also asked in my article last month, will the Isle of Wight elect its first ever female MP? The answer to that question was an emphatic no. Green Party candidate Vix Lothian was the only female candidate. Despite opening a pop-up shop in Newport and delivering thousands of leaflets, the Green vote went backwards, even though the Lib Dems decided not to field a candidate and instead threw their support behind Ms. Lothian. This must surely now be the end of Miss Lothian's political ambitions on the Isle of Wight. The reality is the Greens are too extreme for us, and we certainly aren't warming, excuse the pun, to the ridiculous Extinction Rebellion wing of the party. Despite Labour taking a hammering nationally, they had a good result on the island, thanks to the appeal of new candidate Richard Quigley. Quigg has managed to increase the Labour vote, and if the Greens had stepped aside, Labour might have been able to give Brexit Bob a run for his money. When's all said and done, I can't help but feel optimistic about the future of the island. After all, Boris Johnson had promised Mr. Seely an island deal. He now has 5 years to get us that promised deal, so let's give Bob a chance. Happy Xmas. Election is over. Actually, there is a little article by Bob Seely called Government Cash Heading Our Way. First, thank you for re-electing me as the island's MP. Regardless of whether you voted for me or not, I'm here to serve all islanders and to speak for the island. The day I'm writing this, we are voting on the withdrawal bill to leave the EU. The endless Groundhog Day of MPs trying to block the 2016 referendum is over. Boris's victory on December the 12th put paid to that. We're now able to respect the mandate the British people and the people of the Isle of Wight gave us, not before time. This issue was not just about leaving the EU, but about respect for democracy and trust. MP should always remember we serve the people who elect us. I will never forget that. While the negotiations with the EU will continue for months to come, the political decision to leave the EU will happen on January the 31st. We will build a new and constructive relationship with Europe and re-energise our country. When you first elected me, I said I would make sure government listened to the island more. Working together with communities across the island, as well as the council and other groups, we're achieving that. In the coming months, the island will receive an injection of 48 million into its health service. We're the only trust in the South East to receive this funding, which will see our NHS Trust become a national leader in telemedicine. There will also be extra millions to upgrade parts of St Mary's. I know this is welcomed by so many islanders. Rail users will benefit from a 26 million investment in our railway, with more modern trains, track improvements and a regular half-hourly service improving connections to the mainland. Nationally, we will have more police officers through the government's recruitment of 20,000 new officers over the next 3 years, while our schools will benefit from increased funding too. At a minimum, every secondary school will receive at least £5,000 per pupil, and every primary at least £3,750 per pupil next year. Although this has been a difficult year for British politics, we can enter 2020 with our faith restored in democracy, and as an island, we can continue to see positive change. Thank you again for putting your faith in me as your MP. I wish you a happy new year. And now, a sporting article. Here we have Glenn Jones, who is a marathon runner, and he completes 12 marathons in 2019 for the NSPCC. National Children's Charity, the NSPCC, were the real winners after island runner Glenn Jones completed his challenge of doing 12 marathons in 2019. Glenn, a foster carer, got his marathon a month challenge underway with the Phoenix running Excalibur 1 in Essex. Despite the major hiccup of picking up a knee injury in July's Space Race Gold Marathon, which he just failed to complete and forced him to miss the follow-up in Bath, Glenn crossed the finishing line on Sunday a happy man after completing his Portsmouth Coastal Marathon. Glenn, 49, who holds the NSPCC very close to his heart, set himself a £2,200 fundraising target in aid of the charity this year. So far, the technology consultant has amassed £3,177.65, with the further cash pledged to come. Glenn, who completed the marathon in 4 hours 36 minutes, said, "The year has flown by. I have genuinely loved the experience. Yes, it has thrown up some really challenging moments, but that was the point of doing this. It wasn't supposed to be easy." Would I recommend doing the challenge to other runners? Definitely, as long as you have a few marathons under your belt. One of the highlights was the London Marathon. Doing that for the NSPCC was very special. I'm chuffed to have finished in under 4 hours 4 times and shaved some time off my PB. Oh, well, good for Glenn Jones. Well, that's the end of this morning's readings. I'm Megan, and I'll say goodbye and a really, really happy new year.
BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Now, this could be fun to control. 4 musicians in the studio from a variety of genres with one thing in common, apart from music. You're all visually impaired. Well, it is in touch after all. But is there any truth in that awestruck comment we often hear? Well, of course, you're all so musical, aren't you? So, at this particularly music-filled time of year, we thought it would be fun in the last 2 programmes of 2019 to hear musicians share their experiences and stories of music as a career, as a subject of study, as a love affair, as an obsession, and share some of the anecdotes that performance tends to throw up, funny and sad. Let's start with the briefest of self-portraits.
My name's Andre Louis. I'm a keyboard player from London.
I'm Anne Wilkins and I'm a soprano from Wales.
I'm Sean Hayward, aka Sublimey. I'm a singer-songwriter, multi-instrumentalist and now beat boxer.
And I'm Liz Harguest, a flute teacher and a performer.
That's the cast. Here's the plan. Each of the 2 programmes will feature 2 of your careers so far, with the rest of you picking up on some of the themes that they raise, with some musical Christmas treats thrown in. Let's start with you, Liz Harguest. Now, no Mozart, you know, knocking out symphonies at the age of 4. You were a late starter. Just explain.
My parents were very keen for me to take a career that they felt would provide me with security. So I became a physiotherapist when I left school. I stayed in that career for 20 years, but I married and had 5 children who all started playing music. And I thought, oh, this is much more fun than being a physio. I think I'm going to change careers.
So were you musical, or was it just that something almost intellectual, something you wanted to do?
I did a bit of piano at school, but like everyone, I gave it up. But as soon as I had the flute in my hand, it was like my third arm. I just am passionate and love every minute of playing and performing.
And how hard was it to get started?
Well, it was hard because it took me over 2 years to find somebody that would teach me, because as soon as I told them I couldn't see, they made an excuse. But I found somebody in the end who believed in me, and then I found others who believed in me.
So, I mean, that's intriguing from the start. Given what I was saying about everybody thinks, of course, we must be musical. Why didn't people want to teach you because you couldn't see?
Because they had no concept of Braille music, and I'm not really sure. I think they were scared.
Of?
Me.
Just of teaching a blind person?
Yes, I think so. I think you have to win people over.
And I mean, was that something you found a lot, this kind of resistance?
Yes, when I wanted to train to be a Suzuki teacher, I rang up the administrator and she said, how can you possibly teach the flute if you can't see? And I said, well, the only way I can explain is if you come and watch me. But I do.
Well, we aren't so hard to please. You haven't brought along an orchestra with you, but we're happy for you to audition for us. What are you going to play for us?
I'm going to play O Holy Night. Liz
Harguest, thanks very much indeed. That was great. Why did you go into teaching? Clearly you wanted to start playing, but what took you into teaching?
I have a passion to share what I have learnt on the flute with those who can carry it on. I enjoy education. I just love teaching children. I taught a student for a term for nothing to see if I could do it. I didn't charge the parents because I wanted to prove to myself that I could do it.
What about the parents? You said that people didn't want to teach you when you were teaching children. Did you get that same kind of resistance?
I didn't really. I had one student who said, I don't know how you can teach me if you can't see, but I'd like to have a go. And she became one of my greatest fans. Because sometimes parents come into lessons and watch me teach, which I'm happy about. And when I say to a child, would you stand on both feet and put your head up? The parents can't understand how I know that the child is standing on one leg and their head is down.
Well, how do you know? I can't understand it either.
Sound. I listen to their sound and the movement of their body. If they're on one leg, it's usually swinging, so you can hear a bit of rattle in their clothes. And the sound is very different when their head's up to when their head's down. If you talk with your head down, it's a bit like that. And when you put your head up, it's clear and bright. And it's a little bit the same on the flute.
So do you actually touch them to do this? I'm interested in what techniques you adopt.
I touch very little, but I always ask permission from parents that I do need to touch them. There are certain key points. The right-hand thumb is a key point that has to be in the right place, which I wouldn't be able to see without touching them. But I can hear most of the other things, Peter. I can hear when their fingers are a long way from the keys, because when they hit the keys, they hit them hard.
Right, Liz, thanks for the moment. I'm interested in these stereotypes that I mentioned at the beginning. Can we just pick up on this point of whether there is anything intrinsic in blindness which leads to greater musicality? I mean, it sounds like humbug. We all know it's humbug. But do any of you feel you've got, an automatic entry into music based on the fact that you're blind?
I don't think I have. No, I don't think so.
Sean?
No, definitely no automatic thing. I think certainly through the 80s and the 90s, especially, there was a lot of money around in the 90s. Image was just such a big thing. So besides racism or misogynism or anything, disabilityism or what do you want to call it, it's still alive and well within the industry, I'd say.
But shouldn't that be actually in your favour, in a sense, in the sense that if people think that blind people must be good musicians, that ought to be a positive, isn't it? I'm surprised, perhaps, that you think to any extent there was a resistance, or that there is the kind of resistance you've talked about.
I think you need to turn it around, Peter. I think we are primarily musicians. And secondly, we happen to have the disability of being blind.
Absolutely.
That's how I see it.
Totally. That's the word.
Stevie Wonder's just Stevie Wonder. He's not blind.
To prove the point, I think I must be one of the few blind people who's failed an oral test in an exam. So I think that proves the point that, you don't have this special something. Your hearing isn't almost superhuman. You're just an ordinary person who has to develop in the same way as everyone else.
So why do you think that perception is out there then?
I think possibly people think that because you can't see, you obviously rely on all your other senses, and sound is one of the main ones which you would rely on. So I think people automatically have that thought. I mean, I was at a workshop about 2 years ago, took part in a workshop with sighted musicians, and I was part of a choir that was got together for the day, and we learned to song as we went along, and the person standing next to me said, "Of course, I suppose you have perfect pitch." And I said, "No, not at all."
Let me bring in Sean Hayward, and I'm interested really how you got involved in music.
Yeah, I was 12, and my dad just saw something in me. I'm not come from a musical family anyway. He took me over to my Uncle Bob, who taught Hammond organ, and he taught me to read music a little bit because I was partially sighted at the time, So I learned the fundamentals, but even though I was kind of losing interest, and I was about 15, and Dad just said, "Look, you're not into this no more." I said, "No, not really," and he was great about it. So he's wasted all that money. So I left the lessons. I felt this sort of relief of going, I don't have to play organ and all that. And then 2 weeks later, I wrote my first song. And then it all made sense of what my relationship to music is.
And did you know you were going to do that? I mean,
yes, but just knew from that. Just being able to process my thoughts and how I felt that day into a song. I suppose looking back now, I didn't this time. It's the psychotherapy of it all.
But did you have this in mind as a career? Because a lot of people do say, oh, it is a career for blind people. Did you have it in mind, or was it just something you felt you had to do?
I just had to do it. I just had to write, I had to play, I had to perform, I had to just push it and keep doing it. And the joy at the time I had for it just drove me on and on.
And on this point about it being assumed that we're going to be good at it, was it important to you not to use blindness to help or drive your career and opportunity?
Yeah, kind of run away from it in many ways, really did everything. And I was going through that period of partial sight and losing my sight progressively over 10, 15 years. And anyone knows if you've got to pick up a stick and all that embarrassment as a young person, all those things. So I was determined not to look blind in any way.
Would you not have used it if it was going to be useful to you?
No, I just didn't like it. I mean, it was just your anecdote there, Anne. It reminded me of one. I worked in the Ford studio in Oswestry as the in-house engineer for 3 or 4 years. And one day the engineer of the Rolling Stones came in. It was just Saturday morning. And he took my hand, cupped it, stroked it and go, wow, what a pair of ears. And I was thinking, God, I really should have had them pinned back when I was 14.
Well, Sean, every Christmas needs a Grinch, of course, and you have brought your own musical take on the festive season. Do you want to just introduce it for us?
This is called Always Christmas. Always Christmas, when I truly miss us rocking round TOTP. Hit all the rappers back in the tree was knackered. No one noticed for another year. Look away, look away. It had to happen on such a day, and I know you don't mind, but I think I'm gonna. Could have been that breakfast bomb setting me up to write this song. Hey, who cares? It's Papa Clock somewhere. You see, I'll be stuck in the middle. She's a cracker and he's on the fiddle, but as long as we get through the soap and know the truth, look away, look away. It had to happen on such a day, and I know you don't mind, but I think I'm gonna cry. And I know it this time. Health, love and happiness is more than I could ever digest. No wonder with those bells banging on. Look away, look our way. It had to happen such a day, and I know you don't mind. It's the only way to survive, and I know it this time. Always bloody Christmas.
Hey. Not exactly 9 lessons and carols, but thank you very much. Sean, what is intriguing, you got out of music. Why?
Yeah. Jaded is the word, I think, Peter. I'd done so much in music. I'd always moved and changed, through different instruments. And then as my sight got worse, I went away and studied and became a sound engineer. And then I went off and, as I said, worked at the Forge and became the in-house engineer then. And so very much into engineering and producing, all that side of it, along with still writing. And you're pushing every angle of the industry, learning all the new stuff. And I think in a way I could have learned so much different stuff and tried so many things. It became, I don't know, not a source of comfort anymore.
So in the 8 years that you weren't doing it, what did you go off and do?
I became a dancer. I went and studied salsa, Bachata, modern jive. We really, really enjoyed it. And I think that helped in the subconscious of getting into the groove of music and seeing music from another angle rather than hearing it and going, I know what that chord is and all this sort of thing. But unfortunately, it was the bad injuries to my left leg and the third one capped it. And I just had to stop dancing. So I then went off and became a Qigong and Tai Chi instructor.
Right. But you're back in music now.
Loving it.
What are you doing now?
I've now created a guy called Sublime. I taught myself to beatbox. It was about 3.5 years ago. And then started playing electric guitar, which I'd never really done because I just, it's not my thing. And bit by bit, just started to build this whole thing. And it's took 3.5 years of where I am. I've currently got 22 original tracks and I'm about to unleash it or whatever. Or just upset people next year. 2020, the year of the blind man.
And you told us why you got out of music. What took you back?
I just decided at that point I wasn't going to be listening to anybody else. I'm going to just do it all my way in the end.
Can I just finally, in tonight's programme, just to ask you this, you all seem to have been, in a way marching to the beat of your own drum. Isn't music something where you know you're good at it, where you can actually go your own way? I mean, Anne, isn't it something you can make, you can do it yourself without taking any notice of what other people are saying to you?
Yes, I think it is. I think it does help you to think for yourself in all sorts of ways, not just musical, but in other parts of your life as well.
Andre, in a way, you seem a bit more chilled. You don't sound as if you've ever been able to conceive of life without music, in a way.
I couldn't. It's my livelihood, even though I'm not actually really employed by it. I do want to be. But yeah, I do live for music, next to my beautiful kids and wife. Oh, yeah. But yeah, music is great, and I don't know what I'd do without it, truthfully.
Right. Well, it does feel as if we've only just started this discussion and it's time to go. But for once, we can actually say come back next week because we're going to be rejoining Liz Hargest, Sean Hayward, Anne Wilkins and Andre Louis with more on Andre and Anne's story on New Year's Eve. For now, though, really, we want someone to play us out. But we've deputed Liz to organise you all. Liz, what are you going to make them do?
Now we are going to hear the In Touch Orchestra and Choir with Joy to the World.